Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today is our lecture or talk, our discussion on getting your poems published. We have Holly Pelesky here with us, who does a lot of publishing with her work in journals and anthologies, and she has a book coming out August 2nd. So she's doing all right. But she's a great teaching artist with us with the Nebraska Writers Collective, and has just one of those folks who I really see helping anyone, her students that she works with, as well as others with publishing resources. And so I'm excited to get a full talk from her. And as questions come up for you, please bring them up and help us focus this discussion on the things that you really want to learn. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Holly.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, just to echo what Matt was saying, don't want to lecture, but I will if I have to. So that being said, if you have any questions, just jump right in. I'm going to share my screen, so I probably won't notice if you do one of those little emojis or chat. So just talk. Like, you can just unmute and say whatever, and that's totally fine. But before we jumped in, I wanted to see if there's anything in particular you all are looking to get out of today. And if so, I want to make sure to cover it. So just to kind of start with that. So anyway, I'll just have everyone introduce themselves. I know we can see each other's names on the screen, but if we could just do a quick introduction. I'm going to put the order in the chat. So just your name, pronouns, and what you'd like to get out of today, if anything in particular. I'm putting you in the order I see you on my screen. Okay, so we'll start with Matt.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Matt. And my pronouns are he, him. I've published quite a bit, but I'm really interested in this talk because still my defaults are from the 90s essentially, so I'm used to using self-addressed stamped envelopes, and I'm still kind of adjusting to this much easier, much less expensive internet-based publishing world, where I've had some things picked up, but I always want to learn more. So happy to be here.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I started publishing in undergrad, which was, I don't know, 2004, and I was sending things in through the mail, going to the post office. It's gotten a lot easier, thankfully. Okay, Brianna, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Brianna.
Yes, Brianna. Hi, so I'm Brianna. I go by she, her, and I actually got an email about an hour ago from my English teacher to join the Zoom. I didn't even know this was going on. She told me to join, and I didn't even really know what it was for, and then I realized it was for publishing, and she kind of knows that I've been looking to get published, get my work out there. I decided this year to challenge myself and to write a poem a day in the new year. And I'm not necessarily writing a poem a day. I'm more so writing 365 poems in a year, because I'm not always with that creative inspiration. And so I think, why am I having all these poems just go to my eyes only when I can have other people look at them as well? So I guess I'm just kind of looking for getting my work out there.
That is amazing. What dedication. I think the writers that end up getting published are the writers who keep at it. And the fact that you're writing that frequently, I mean, if you put that same energy in publishing, you will definitely be published widely for sure. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Hi, Joe. You're on mute, Joe.
It didn't. The space bar, complicated. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe from Long Island. So I self-published my first book, and I have finished writing my second manuscript. And so I started to try to imagine, if I didn't have to self-publish, what that would look like. So I actually submitted, like, for the first time ever recently to a small press. So that was kind of exciting. So it's really the process of real publishing is completely new to me, and so I'm just here for tips and tricks and to kind of get a feel for what I can expect as I go through the process. So I'm really happy to be here, and I go by he, him pronouns.
Thank you, Joe. And if anyone has any questions about self-publishing, I'm going to default to you, if that's okay. Okay. All right. Let's see. Who did I put next? Oh, this isn't the order in my. Oh, yeah. Jen. Hello, Jen.
Hey, hi. I'm Jen. My pronouns are she, her. I'm always happy to learn whatever I can from Holly, which happens frequently. So I feel fortunate in that way. And I'm a teaching artist with the Nebraska Writers Collective. So I decided to join this particular session also because I'm interested in learning more about how I can help guide my students in their own publishing. I, as everyone has said, am always still learning the process, and it's always changing. And so just trying to keep up on things too. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Jen. And preemptive thank you to Jen, because some of the slides her and I made together a long time ago. So thank you for the gift that keeps on giving. Okay, who do I have next? Shelley.
I had the same issue as Joe. I don't know, something about that computer. Shelley Nosfish. I'm also a teaching artist with the Nebraska Writers Collective, and I'm excited about this. I think Holly's a phenomenal teacher, and I'm excited to learn about how to help my students get published. And if I accidentally get published along the way, it's not a bad thing. So
We can all be published. You, your students, everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, thank you. And Gabby?
Hello, I'm Gabby. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm really just excited to learn what I can. Thank you for having this class.
Gabby, I think I've seen you on a Zoom before, haven't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, what Zoom was that? I remember you from, was it the Opera Omaha one maybe?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Glad to see you again. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And like I said, if anyone has any comments, thoughts, questions, anecdotes, anything, feel free to jump in. It's meant to be discussion. So, hold on, that didn't work. No, you guys, I'm not technologically savvy. I was just telling Matt I'm almost 39 and it shows when I share my screen. Okay, so everyone can see this, right? Okay. All right, so we're just going to kind of go over. I decided it's hard to decide where to start. I was like, oh, I don't know. So I made us a little order and we can kind of jump around. But today we'll cover finding the journals that you want to submit to, which is kind of a big and somewhat overwhelming process. So I've hopefully made it a little easier for you. We'll get to that in a minute. And then we're going to talk a little bit about submission guidelines, how to read them and appropriately submit after reading through those, and then submitting your work, the actual process of sending your stuff to somebody else. And then the kind of follow-up things are keeping track. These are things for your own self, keeping track of your submissions, and then sharing your publications once you are accepted. So we're going to kind of go through it as if we're going through the process A to Z together today on this Zoom. So starting with finding the journals you want to submit to. And I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but I thought we'd start here because I think a lot of times when you set out to submit, that's kind of the first thing. And it's like, oh, where do I even send? We all know about the New Yorker, send it there. Paris Review, sure. Then what? So there's all types of different journals. A lot of them are attached to schools, academic journals, like their undergrads will be the readers for their journals, and then they'll be published through the university. So those are always a good place. But before we get into all of those, I like to start with something personal. So if you think about what you already have in your arsenal, you can use that to your advantage, right? So if there's any literary journals you already read, you already know the aesthetic that they publish, and that's usually a very good place to start, right? If they're publishing things like what you make, send it to them. You already know. Like a lot of times the process is overwhelming because you don't know all these journals and what it is they're after. But if you already have one in mind, go for that one. Another resource is the people you know. I'm going to put my hair up. I'm sorry. I don't feel like I'm serious until my hair's up. So if you know any published writers or Brianna, you were mentioning your English teacher, maybe. Ask them where you should send your work. They might already be a resource, so you don't have to start the work from ground zero all by yourself. Or if you are in a SLAM club, ask your SLAM teacher. They probably know some journals that might be a fit for you. And then kind of a popular place to start is with the writers you love. So when I was an undergrad, it was like 20 years ago, so things have changed, but we used to read the acknowledgements page of our favorite book of poetry. And so I really love Sharon Olds. So I would look, where has Sharon Olds been published? And then I would send my stuff to them. And granted, Sharon Olds is a very famous poet, and she gets published in very top tier journals. So I got a lot of rejections, but it was a place to start nonetheless. But you might know people maybe making stuff like you are in the same age bracket, and oftentimes places that publish youth once will publish youth again and again and again. So that's usually a good resource as well. Okay, so I tell my students to start small. Like, you've heard that phrase, you want to be a big fish in a little pond instead of a little fish in a big pond. So if you send your work to the New Yorker, you're a little fish in a big pond. There's, you know, they get thousands and thousands of submissions probably every day. I don't know exactly. So you have a very, very small percentage of getting in there. No matter how good your work is, you know, they skim, they read to find to say no, right? Instead of to say yes. So I would start places locally, if there's any local opportunities. So if you're here in Nebraska, look at places that only publish Nebraska writers, or look at places that only publish youth, things like that. So there's different ways that you are identified, right? By your location, by your age, like I mentioned, by what you write. So like if you write horror, you can find journals that only publish horror, and that would be a good place to start. Or by your identity. So if you identify as LGBTQ, there are some great journals that look to amplify those voices. If you're a person of color, anything that identifies you outside of, you know, the another white person sending in writing, you know, if there's anything about you that's different than the normal, see if there's anything that publishes that. One of my first publications was from an LGBTQ journal. And so that's a good place to start too. Okay, so this is a resource that we're going to come back to later, because this is like, I want to be in the New Yorker, I want to be in the Paris Review, I want to be in all the best places. This is a slide. Oh, Matt, I meant to share this, didn't I? Hold on, I'm going to drop this in the chat. I forgot to tell you guys that earlier. I'm sorry. Okay, now I got to open this. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm sorry. Can I see the chat while I'm sharing my screen? I don't think so. There. Okay, this is, you guys should all be able to click on this and save it if you want the link somewhere, and you can view this later, so you don't have to be stressed about writing things down. You can just have all of this information. Okay, back to sharing my screen. Share screen. Okay. All right, so anyway, these are some of the top places. These are ranked lists. So Poets and Writers this is actually just a database, but these are ranked lists of the best literary journals, and that's based on who gets the most pushcart nominations and things like that, like which of these journals publish the writing that gets the most awards. So that is a resource for you if you're looking for top tier journals. But I would start personally with these, which we'll get back to in a minute. These are some resources I've made for you that are really specific to teens. So they don't only publish teens, some of them, but they accept writing from teens, and some of them do actually only publish teens. So we'll get back to that in a second. Okay, so now that I know you guys can't see what's going on here, but I made you all really small. Okay, and I want you back. Okay, then I don't feel like I'm alone in a room. Okay, so we're going to move on to submission guidelines in a minute, but does anyone have any questions before that? Or thoughts or anecdotes?
Hey, Holly, I just wanted to check and make sure the link you shared for us, that's for this PowerPoint or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, and the PowerPoint has there's all sorts of hyperlinks within the PowerPoint as well that they can get to from there.
perfect.
But
Making
yes, I can share a spreadsheet and a form as well, but it is again in the PowerPoint. So
cool.
other thoughts, questions? Am I talking too fast? I do talk fast. I always tell my slam poets, slow down. I'm like, who am I to say that? Okay, so let's talk about submission guidelines. So say you found a journal that you want to submit to. First thing you're going to do is go to their submission guidelines. So every literary journal, their website will have somewhere, sometimes it's hard to find, but somewhere there will be a tab that says submissions. You want to get to that, and there will be all sorts of stuff under the submission guidelines. And the more of these you read, the faster you get at skimming them. But this is kind of what they talk about, which type of work or writers they're looking to publish, when their reading period is. Not all journals are open all the time, unfortunately. The academic ones usually read throughout the school year, September to May. And then some of them just kind of randomly open and close for submissions. And then some of them just have a planned reading period. There are some that read year long, and those ones are easy. You know when you can submit. How many pieces to send in and their length restrictions. And I know Matt mentioned this is for publishing your poetry, but I actually have resources for all types of writers. I write fiction and essays in addition to poetry. So all the spreadsheets I make have all of them on there because I never know what I'm going to need to publish next. So I just like to have it all in one place. So if you're sending in fiction or essays, there's often a word requirement. They don't want to publish anything over 5,000 words is a common one. If you're sending in flash pieces, usually the word requirement is 1,000 words. But if you're sending in poetry, they usually tell you how many poems they want as well. Usually 3 to 5, 1 to 5. Some places only take 1. So that will all be on the submission guidelines. How they'd like your piece formatted. Usually they're looking for a PDF or a Word document, but there will be nuances to that. And then this is a big one, whether it costs money to submit. So some places do charge a reading fee. It's typically $3. So you can decide whether or not that's something that you're willing to pay. There are a lot of journals that don't charge any money to submit. So we'll kind of go back to that on the spreadsheet in a minute, but that should be right there in the submission guidelines as well. So you know what you're getting into before you start submitting. Really nice journals tell you how long until you hear back, but a lot of them don't tell you. I'm here to tell you it can be anywhere from an hour to over a year. Like it's a really big range. A lot of journals say 3 months is kind of they try to respond to everyone in 3 months. But I have things in my queue from July that are not making any movements. So sometimes it's 6, 8, 10. You really just kind of pack in your patience when you're submitting, and you submit to a lot of places at once. So while you're waiting on that, you can also have it in someone else's queue somewhere else. And then how to send in your work. And we'll go over kind of the main ways you submit your work. Like Matt was saying earlier, it's mostly electronically, luckily. So you can really just spend a day submitting and fire off the same thing a bunch of places or a bunch of things all at one time, and then let them all sit together. And then if you get some rejections, do it again in a month, so it's up to you. Some people like to do one submission at a time. I personally like to go on a blitz, and I just go nuts, send out like 25, call it good, let them sit there, and then I come back to it.
Holly,
Hey, yes,
before you move on, can I just say a couple things?
please.
Okay. First, I want to reiterate something you already said, but if we have people who are new to submitting, I think it's worth emphasizing that you will get faster at looking for these pieces of information in the submission guidelines. I remember when I first started and it was overwhelming, and I tend to be a little bit of a perfectionist, and I get really nervous, and like my anxiety gets really high because I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I mess up? Well, first of all, it's not that big of a deal if you mess up. It's not the end of the world. And the people who are receiving your submissions, they've seen everybody, all kinds of mess ups. So not that big of a deal, but also you will start to get faster at looking for these specific pieces of information that you need. So if it seems like it's too much when you start, just keep at it, because I promise it gets better. And Holly was saying some people like to submit one thing at a time or do a blitz. And I'm on the blitz team also, because I get really nervous about doing submissions. And so every time I sit down to submit, the first one is it's really hard for me to hit that button. But the more you do it, you kind of become numb to it. And then it's like, just throw it out there. So for me, it works better if I say, okay, for the next hour, I'm just going to submit. By the end of the hour, you kind of throw your hands up and go, well, it is what it is. So those are just some things that I have found helpful. And I also wanted to just say, I do have a submission out there from September of 2017.
Whoa.
Which a couple years ago, I decided I'm just going to let that ride and see how long does it take. So it's just out there. So hopefully you'll hear back in, weeks or months, not years, but I always, when I need to laugh, I go, when was it? How long ago was it that I sent that? Oh yeah.
Is the journal still in operation?
Yeah.
Wow.
Can you reveal who they are?
Yeah.
I don't know if I should.
I'm curious. You can just throw it in the chat so the people here get the information, but the people watching don't know. So we're not shaming them on the internet. Yeah, thank you, Jen. That's really, really helpful. And I was thinking that too. I have some of the places that you submit just ask for you to email it. They don't use a submission manager. And I have forgotten to attach my attachment. There's places that read blind, and we'll get to all these on the next slide, but which means they don't want to know who wrote it. And I have sent it in with my name on it. Like, these things have happened, and I could have spent more minutes being meticulous and careful, and maybe I should have. But by and large, the editors write back like, oh, you forgot to attach, or like, hey, sorry, we can't take this because it wasn't submitted blind. And it's just a learning process. It's not the end of the world. It's, you live and you learn.
I have a question on what you guys are saying. Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Go for it.
I was just wondering when you said things that they're looking for. So are you meaning if we go on a website to where we want to submit like a list of things they're looking for in our poem, like to be anonymous or to have like so many stanzas?
Yeah, they don't usually give you restrictions on like stanzas or types of forms of poetry. I guess that could come up once in a while. I know there's one journal I can think of that only publishes haikus or things like that. So they usually won't tell you topics they want to see or forms they want to see, but they'll really tell you what they're not looking for more often than not. So that's why reading the journals is really your best bet at knowing if your work's a fit. But then again, who has time to read, 500 lit journals? There's hundreds and hundreds of them, and new ones are popping up all the time, and old ones are closing down. So yes, ideally you would know like what they're looking for and that your work's a fit. But in the case that you're, getting your feet wet and submitting things, just make sure that you're doing your best to follow their submission guidelines. So send it in the format they want. If they say 1 to 3 poems, send 1 to 3 poems, not 6, not 8. So yeah, but oftentimes they won't tell you exactly what they're looking for. That being said, there are journals that do themes. So like their next issue is the theme of water, for example. If that's the case and you have a poem already that fits the theme, or you're interested in making one, that's a great opportunity to make that poem and send it in. So sometimes I'll use submission guidelines as kind of a deadline for myself to make something, to make sure I'm creating work and not just sending old work. So great question. There was another question too, I think.
Yeah, sorry, Shelley, I have a question. I don't know if it's a question so much as a comment. I have mainly focused my publication efforts on fiction writing. And so, you send out the query letters to agents, and this just feels so different than you're just submitting it directly to the publisher, and you're talking about setting 25 at a time. That felt really overwhelming to me because I just normally would send out maybe like 5 to 10 at a time. But I also, when I'm sending to agents, I'm looking for their, do the publishers send you any feedback on your poems at all if they're rejecting it, or is it just like a blanket no?
Some do. There's a lot of chitter chatter in the literary community about if people like those. A lot of people don't want feedback if they're not accepted. They don't want to hear why they were rejected. They just want a blanket no. So it seems like a lot of journals will just give you a blanket no. But there are different tiers of rejections. So like they might say, no, it's not a fit for us right now, but please send us your work again later. And that would be a top tier rejection. So that would mean your work wasn't a fit for whatever reason, but they liked your writing style and they want to see more from you. So that being said, there are different types of rejections, but yeah, there are some that you can also pay to receive feedback. Like they'll say, there's a little check box and submittable, check this box if you want to hear, specific response, and then you can do that. But usually it's just going to be kind of a generic no. And then you seem to have a lot more experience, Shelley, with the queries. Like, are you talking about like book length manuscripts?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. With individual pieces, you don't really have to do as much work. So that's why, 5 to 10, it seems like a lot to me for queries. Like that seems intense. So honestly, I think it's probably the same, not less work to send out 25 individual pieces as sending out 5 queries. That being said, I haven't actually sent out a query. It just seems really overwhelming.
Great, thank you.
Good for you doing all that hard work. Okay, so we were going over some of the submissions, like buzzwords. So I think that these are helpful to know. You're going to see these a lot. So just knowing what it means before you reach that makes you feel probably more at ease. One thing you'll see a lot is simultaneous submissions. So most journals accept simultaneous submissions. That means, say you have a poem called River out at one journal. If the next journal you look at says we accept simultaneous submissions, you can send River to that journal as well. It's just kind of expected that in order, like if we just waited for each journal to reply before sending it out again, we might be 95 before our poems got published. It could take a long time. So journals know that by and large, people are submitting the same thing to more than one place. There are a few places that do not accept simultaneous submissions. And so in that case, you do have to wait. You send it to them and then you wait. And then once you hear back from them, you can send it elsewhere. So if there's a journal that you really want to get into that does not accept simultaneous submissions, I suggest sending to them first. Let it sit there. They're usually, if they don't accept simultaneous submissions, they usually kind of keep it moving. They know that you're impatient and waiting to send it elsewhere if it doesn't get picked up. So they usually get back to you within a couple months. And then if that was a no, then send it to the place that accepts simultaneous submissions and see what happens. Reading period, we kind of already talked about, just the range of time when they accept work. And yeah, like I said, it's usually pre-planned, but there are certain journals that will just open for a quick reading period. Like there's this one called HAD that will open until they get 200 submissions. And it's usually like 2 or 3 minutes because that's how people are waiting for their submission periods to start. So yeah, I like the ones that are open year round. It makes it a lot easier. You don't have to keep track of all that. Previously published. Most journals will not accept previously published work. So if that poem River gets published in journal A, you probably can't send it out to very many places again. That kind of becomes its home until kind of the evolution of a written piece is until you find a book to also nest it inside of. So usually just one journal takes it and then it ends up in a book in the future. And then you credit that first journal with first publishing it. There are a few journals that do accept previously published work. And this is nice, like say your piece was published like 4 years ago and you're like, nobody even reads it anymore because, we're just such a culture of what's now, what's immediate. So you can look for places that do reprint previously published work. One thing I wanted to add on this is previously published also means social media and blog posts. So I know we live in a social media time, but if you're publishing your poems on social media, you're actually disqualifying them from being published in a journal. So I would be careful not to publish things online on your own unless you're not looking to publish them elsewhere. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. If you already had a piece online, you can take it down and then submit it I think that would work. If anyone has any thoughts on that, feel free to jump in, but I think that would count.
I do have a quick question on that. So
Yeah.
unknowingly, I guess I did submit a poem to a newsletter of a group that I belong to. So I guess that would be considered published, right? Because they did put it in the newsletter.
I think it would be.
So,
Probably, technically. I mean, is it an online newsletter or?
nope. It's a small circulation. It's a small group of people, but nevertheless, they did put it in the newsletter. So.
That one's kind of a tricky one because it's like such a small circulation and it's only in print.
Yeah.
So someone couldn't find it online.
Right. Only local. Like, I mean, I don't even, yeah, I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, no, if that were my case and I really wanted a bigger audience for it, I think I would maybe just mention in my cover letter.
Okay.
Has been previously published, but only, in a just in a local. And I think that most people probably wouldn't count that because you can't find it. You can't discover it unless they just happened to get that newsletter, So yeah, if you want that to have a wider audience, I think I would give it a try.
Okay. Thanks.
And you said if you put it on social media and you take it down, it's okay?
I think it would be, yeah, because they're really looking to make sure that they can't also find this somewhere else. So yeah, I have actually done that before. I kept a blog for like 12 years. And so when I started submitting things, I unpublished all the blogs with things I wanted to publish, and then I sent it in, and I think that was fine. So yeah, again, this is my own perspective, so take it for what it's worth.
I had made a bunch of I'm really into video editing as well. So I made a bunch of videos where I would voice over my poems. It's kind of hard to describe. I would just do a voiceover of my poem and have a video that resembled what I was saying in my poem. And so I would upload those, but my mom recently told me about a month ago that I should be taking them down because if someone were to copy them or plagiarize them. So I ended up doing that, but that's good to know.
No, that's actually, your mom is on the right track. That does happen frequently, but once you have it published, you can point to that as your own work, right? It's already been published. So then some of that worry goes away. So if I were you, I would, like your mom said, keep it down until it's published work, and then feel free to put those videos back up, right? Like once you do get something published, usually after 30 days, the rights revert to you, meaning you can do what you want with your poem. They're your words. So you could put those videos back up, right? Yeah. Matt, were you going to say something?
Yeah, with videos of poems, if the text of the poem isn't on the video, if it's just you saying your poems, I've been told that these are two different formats, so that a print journal can print a video or can print a poem even if there's a video of you performing that poem somewhere. So yeah.
That's a good point. I think you are right, because I mean, think about the slam poets. We have videos of them, but then they also go on to publish in anthologies and journals, and that seems all above board. So
yeah, I've had a number of poems that I've got videos of me online, and I've had those poems published. And at first I was upfront, there is a video of this, and no, they've told me that, oh, that's fine, it's a different format. Somebody might be a stickler someday, but so far.
I'm taking your word for it. You are the state poet, Matt, so I trust you. Okay. And then
I have a quick question too,
Joe.
Along this sort of same format. Like when I self-published my first book, I put it in the Library of Congress for copyright stuff. And I wonder if copyright is something that we need to pay attention to, or I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, I am not a copyright expert. Let's see what Matt has to say. Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, my thought on copyright with poetry is that the stakes are so low financially that I've never paid too much attention to it. Mostly if someone takes my poem and makes a lot of money on it, I just want to know how they did it. They can keep the poem. But then there have been cases, there was a literary journal, and I know the editors, they received a submission that were poems that were mine and my wife's that that these folks knew were mine and my wife's. And this is, you know, I mean, not like at a time when my poems were everywhere. So I'm not sure exactly how they got these poems, the text of it. And it is annoying, but I've also got, when you're submitting poems on Submittable, there's a record of those poems going out. So if someone publishes one of your poems and you've submitted that poem before, you can go, no, look at this submittable record. This shows that I had this poem in 2018, and let that journal know. Or don't go to the person who plagiarized, go to the journals where they're publishing or trying to publish things like that. But overall, if someone's stealing poems, they've got issues. So yeah, I've never been harmed by someone stealing a poem of mine. And so like, I'm not going to be totally lax about it, but I'm not terribly worried either. No.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, the submittable thing makes total sense. You have record of sending it first, right? So there have been some in the literary news plagiarist poets, but they usually get found out. That's the thing about poetry. If it's published online, you can search for that line and it will come up. You can search on Twitter and it will come up. So like, why are you plagiarizing in the digital age? That's so dumb. I don't get it. Okay, and then what other words were we gonna do? Oh, length requirements. Again, we already talked about this too, but that's, you know, how many words maximum or how many poems you can send. And then this is the real thing to look out. Oh, no, I didn't mean to do that. Undo. This no identifying information or reads blind is kind of the, when you're skimming, I mean, reading submission guidelines. You're really looking for this, because if so, you know, to go into your document and take your name out. Some people send in their work without their name on it in the first place, so they don't have to worry about it. I always put my name and the page number in the footer of my documents, so then I have to go back out and take it out. So I should probably just not put my name in there. But then again, some people want your name in there. So there's a little bit of formatting that goes with your submitting. So when I say I send to like 10 to 25 places, I'm sending to the same places. Like all of these are on Submittable and none of them read blind, right? So I don't have to keep reformatting or whatever. Like I'm just sending it down the line. Like I'm copy and pasting my cover letter. That's how I can get so many done so quickly. But if each one has different formatting guidelines, it's going to take you a lot more time. Okay, thoughts, questions? Okay, I'm going to revisit this. I didn't want to talk about it before I had talked over the submission words. But here is, can I just click on this and it'll happen? Okay, here's a spreadsheet I made last year. And I'm saying last year because some of this information might be slightly outdated. But now knowing what you know about submission guidelines, you can see kind of how I made my spreadsheet. This is how I submit because I like to do sorts. Like if it's February, I don't even want to look at the journals that aren't open, right? So I'll sort by only places that are open in February. I have some notes on here and I have age and grade requirements for any youth that are looking to submit. So you want to make sure you're within their requirements, right? So 13 to 18, that probably applies to every high school student on this Zoom. So anyway, these are specific types of demographics they're looking for in their journal. And then I have over here the requirements as far as length. So say you have 3 poems you want to send out, you only want to send it out to places that are looking for, you know, 3 poems, like you've got a little packet of 3 poems. I would just do a sort for the word 3, the number 3, or 1 to 6, or, you know, less than 6. And I would just send it to all of those like that. So here I also have how they want you to submit your work, and then whether or not they pay you. It's rare, but it does happen. And then whether or not it costs money to send to them. So this is a resource for you. Like I said, the link is in the slide and you will now have the link to the slide. So you can use this as a resource. You can copy it and keep adding to it, or take things out that you don't care about or add things you do care about. But But anyway, that's something for you to kind of get started. And I know it's overwhelming and it's huge. So that's why I made this little one too. I also made this. So this is just places, right? So these journals here, these are all places that publish youth or are looking for youth submissions. So any of these would be a good place for you to start. I have a student that just got published in, I just saw it, has the word milk in it. There's too many milks. Anyway, he just got published in one of these, so I added it to the list. So I was like, oh, they publish youth submissions as well. So the top ones are journals. There's also a bunch of contests. If you want to get a prize, prizes are often money or scholarships in some cases. These are contests, and most contests are, pretty specific windows of when they're accepting. So you'll have to click on those individually, but they're in the spreadsheet too, so you can look there. There's also a couple mentorship programs, and I think these are usually for students that are graduating high school and going to college, or just in the gap year, or not going to college, whatever, they're graduating. So these are some options. And then I only know of one poetry scholarship right now, but as I get more, I'll just add it to this document. And then if you want to go bigger than all of the journals already here are more options for you. There's databases and lists right here. This one, Chill Subs, they just made this last month, and it is so cool. So look at this. You can go here, and then it's just has you put in what you're looking for, right? So I don't know, someone just made this on their free time and gave it as a resource to everyone. It's so amazing. So say you wanted to see everything Matt Mason has published. I haven't searched this before, Matt, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, I know, right? So have you been published in these two places? Yep. Isn't that cool? Here, Jen,
really
let's try you, Jen. See what happens. What's going on? Oh, yeah, it just showed. You've been in Fugue, right? I think you have. That one was taking forever. Your last name's too long. It just showed Fugue for you anyway. But anyway, you can search by. So this is when I was saying it's helpful, like people you write search for where they've been published. This is a very easy way to do that, right? I've been published more places, I promise. They only had 75 lit journals on here last I checked, but they keep adding to it. So say you wanted to search, look at this. Very fancy, very impressive, not very fast. You search this, you're probably going to get, the New Yorker, Paris Review, those ones. There we go. Poetry, the New Yorker, Paris Review. But you can also, say you want to get something published soon, right? You want to get a publication so that fill in the blank. You can go to, oh, I'm sorry, there's a curse word on there. I did not think about that. So if you wanted something less intimidating, right? Try that, start there. They'll probably get back to you faster. That's kind of an option as well. So that was a lot of information. I want to check in. Thoughts, questions, anecdotes?
Do you have an example of a cover letter?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that. Let's move into that. That's actually what's coming next. So we'll move into submitting your work. Okay, so submissions wise, like I said, most are electronic. A lot of submissions are done through Submittable, which is a website you sign up for one time. It's free. You put in a username and a password, and then you can use this to log your submissions. So that's a very common one. Some places want you to send in emails, and that's often because Submittable does cost money. So some journals don't want to pay for it or don't have resources for it. They'll have you send an email. Some journals, and this is a lot of academic ones, have their own submission, their own little submission manager. So that looks a form like this. And then there are still a few mail ones that we're probably not going to do, unless you really want to go to the post office, in which case you can do that too. Okay, so here's what we want to have prepared before we go to submit. A cover letter, like you just mentioned, a bio about yourself. The word count, often they'll ask for this up front, or number of poems you're submitting. and then the file in the form that they want, which is usually a .doc or a PDF. So the cover letter, I know people are often like intimidated by, and I think Jen and I, when we were in school together, were probably very intimidated by as well, but it's really not a big deal. Like it's often not even read. So it can just be something brief and short and to the point. And I think less is more because, like I said, knowing that it's often not read, don't spend a lot of your time on it. Spend a lot of time on your poems because that's what's ultimately going to get you published. I don't know any cover letters that got someone published. I know great poems that got people published. So anyway, here's an example of a cover letter. Short and sweet. Dear editors, I am submitting these 3 poems for your consideration. This is a simultaneous submission. I will withdraw the piece immediately if it's accepted elsewhere. Thank you for the work you do and your time and consideration. Sincerely, your name. So that's really all they need, right? Sometimes you might have a piece that needs a little explanation. So like in the case, I wrote a lot of letters to my daughter, like Matt mentioned, that are going to come out this year in a book. But when I was sending those out individually, it's written to a you. And so I had to explain who the you of the piece was, because otherwise they wouldn't know what it was about. So in a collection of book, that's already obvious, but in individual pieces, it wasn't. So if you have something like that, where you need to explain something, feel free to throw that into your cover letter. But by no means, if it's not necessary, don't add it. A lot of times they don't like you to write about, these are poems about, you know, grief, or like a lot of times they don't want an explanation. They want the work to speak for itself. Other things you might want to add to the cover letter is if they are looking to publish certain voices, to make sure you identify as that in your cover letter. Some people don't read submission guidelines and will just send things out without knowing if, you know, they're what they're looking for. So make sure to self-identify if necessary. And Jen, do you have any thoughts? I wanted to ask you. Jen and I work for the same lit journal. So Jen, are there any thoughts that you wanted to add to that?
No,
Cover letter business?
I don't think so, but don't stress about it. I know I spent way too many minutes of my life stressing about it, and it's not that big of a deal. Short and sweet. And you're probably going to talk about bios, but I would say don't stress about that either.
Yeah, and those are always evolving anyway. But yeah, we are going to talk about bios next, actually. Yeah. Did you does that help, Brianna, or did you have any other questions? Good. Okay. There is a link here that you can use as a resource if you'd like. And then there's advice. There's all sorts of things you can Google if you want to spend a lot of time on it. I wouldn't personally. I would just, I just kind of copy and paste, to be honest. Once I made it once, it does the work for me all these years later. I might change it up a little bit, but by and large, once you have it, it's a copy paste thing. Okay. Bio. You're going to need a bio. That was the second thing that we needed for submitting our work. And these are just a short little snippet about you. Something about you as a person, as a writer, what you want to highlight about yourself. So here's an example. If Dorothy Gale was a common 2022 girl, I almost said 2021. So here, this would be like what her bio might read like. Dorothy Gale is a farm girl from Kansas. She likes using fences as balance beams, hanging out with her little dog Toto, and riding in hot air balloons. You can follow her on Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook. I would actually love to see that Pinterest. That sounds very interesting. Okay, so for your bio, you might already have one. I think Shelly probably just wrote one on Thursday, didn't you, Shelly? I think Shelly. Yeah,
I wasn't able to go to that one. Sorry.
Oh, for some reason I thought I saw you. Different Zoom. Okay. So a bio can just be something, like I said, short. 50 words is usually a good kind of place to start and stop. You can make it a little bigger if you want, but there is sometimes a restriction on, 50 words is a good place. So I like to think of a bio as a well-rounded picture of myself. You can tell from someone's bio what's important to them. Like, so in this Dorothy example, her dog Toto is important to her, right? And that's why it gets mentioned in her bio. If I were writing Joe's bio, I would probably write something about his dog as well, because I know Joe's dog is very important to him, right? Or you can write about like what kind of topics you write about. or, you know, where you're from, what you do for a living, or what's an interesting little anecdote about you. There's this writer that I follow who always writes something very interesting about herself that's tied to the story she just had published. So you have all sorts of options here, but kind of a general format is name, education, you know, type of writing. These are all just options too here in italics. And then, like Jen was saying, you don't need to spend a lot of time on this, and you can just keep changing it as much as you want, right? You can start with one thing, and then once you get a publication, you might change it. Now it says, Gabby has been previously published in blank, right? And then, you know, you might get a dog, and then you might add the dog to the bio, right? These are things that just keep evolving alongside of us. So you're going to need to write it in third person as if someone is talking about you. So here are some sample high school bios. And I'm using high school bios because I don't want to be intimidating and show you like Tobias Wolf's bio or something. Like anyone can have a bio. It's not that big of a deal. We don't have to be all fancy about it. So these are some high school bios, and I really like this one. Makia Smith is a sophomore with a bag of Skittles in her drawer who has far too many posters of the Beatles. Like, what a great picture of this writer, right? Like I can just imagine this writer. Like I love that. I love these little personal anecdotes. I think Jen's first bio said something about how much she loves the color black, right, Jen? Yeah, see, like it could just be whatever you want. So questions, thoughts on bios before we move on?
Yes. Is it gonna be written in third person?
Yes, yep. So use this format. So Brianna Sanchez is or writes, or yeah, you'll start with your full name and then write the rest in third person. So refer to yourself, after you use your full name, just refer to yourself by your pronouns from there on. So if you start another sentence, just say, I think you said your pronouns are she, her, right? So you'd say she lives in, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Okay. We're running out of time. It's okay. We're almost through, I promise. So one thing I want to mention is keeping track of where you've sent your work. And it might not seem important, but it really is, because when you start sending your work out, you're now a literary citizen, and there's kind of like rules in a society. We don't want to be rude, and people remember things. So we're not trying to take advantage of any journals or anything like that. So for keeping track of your work, the reason you're doing it is to make sure that once something gets published, you withdraw it from everywhere else that you had it pending. Because like I said, most journals don't want to publish previously published work. Even if they do publish previously published work, you'll still want to let that journal know that it will be forthcoming in whatever, and then they can make their decision from there if they still want to consider it. But another good reason to keep track of your work is you can use this to make sure you're not sending work again to somewhere that you already have something pending, or in the future, like when you have a book, you're going to use your list of where you have been accepted in your acknowledgements page. So it's important to keep track for the literary community and for yourself of where your work is going. And it can just be a really easy spreadsheet. If you don't want a spreadsheet, I love spreadsheets, but if you don't want a spreadsheet, you can just, you know, I started writing on little scraps of paper, and I had one scrap of paper for each poem, and then I would cross it out when I got rejected. You could start with that if you can keep track of your papers. I can't. So anyway, you can just write where you submitted to, when you sent it in, and then what your response was. That's mine. Mine just has 3 columns now. I was fancier back in the day. But it just says where I sent it, what day I sent it, and then what response I received. But if you want to go bigger than that, you can.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
No, don't be sorry. Ask as many questions as you have.
So when, let's just say today I'm going to submit to like 5 different places, am I sending can I send the same poem to those 5 places, or do I send a different poem to each place out of respect?
No, you can send the same poem to 5 places as long as they accept simultaneous submissions. So if you use the spreadsheet that I have, I put in red the ones that don't accept simultaneous submissions, because I like to see that right off the bat. So if it's in red, you can't send that same poem to them. But as long as it isn't, they accept simultaneous submissions. Oh, I also put in red the ones that you can't have your name on, because these are things that trip me up all the time. But yes, go ahead and send that same poem out as many places. And with poetry, they usually look for more than one at a time. So you might have a packet of, 3, 5 poems, and you might be sending those 5 poems to like 6, 10 different places. So yeah, that's totally fine. It sounds like you have way more than 10 poems that you might be sending out though. But if I were you, and I have a lot of poems as well, I make a little batch for each one. So like I will have poems 1 through 5 on one sheet, and I'll send those out to all the same places. And then I'll have poems 6 through 10 in another packet, and I'll send those out to these same places. It just makes it easier for me for keeping track. So you can kind of choose what to do with that. Any other questions? Okay, no, that was a great one. Yeah, poetry gets a little trickier because sometimes, you will have one get accepted somewhere, and then you have those other 4 in that same batch out at all these places. And then you have to go notify all those places with the batch that just this one is no longer, no longer pending because it's been accepted elsewhere. So it's a lot easier to send in essays and fiction. I gotta say, poetry is a whole thing. But you can do it. I totally believe in you. Rejections. Some people get a little, oh, what's the word? They take them personally. Don't. We don't have the time to care that much that one editor didn't pick up this poem, right? There are all sorts of reasons that your work doesn't get picked up, and it's not a reflection of you as a writer or your piece. Sometimes it's didn't fit the theme, or there could be all sorts of reasons. They're already pretty full and all they want now is a single essay, and you sent in a poem, right? There could be so many different reasons that you get rejected. If you take each one personally, you're not going to be a published writer because the writer who gets published is the writer who keeps at it. So if you want to do a fun little thing to remind yourself like getting a rejection is a part of the process. Someone in the Zoom the other day was saying after every 10, their friend gets them something special, something like that. That's a cool way to do it. But hundreds of rejections later, I'm still sending work out, and I'll notice them in my inbox. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'll mark it off on my spreadsheet. But I don't take it personally because otherwise I would have quit a long time ago. There are, like we were mentioning earlier, rejections do have a little bit of something in them. There will be form rejections, and then there will be encouraging rejections. And those encouraging rejections, you want to send something back into that place. If they said send me more of your work, you don't have to that day. But when you have something ready to send in again, send it back to the place that asked for more work because they really respected your writing style and they liked what you were doing. It just wasn't a fit for this particular issue. So just send them something new and see if that is a fit.
I was just gonna say too, Holly, I like to look at, it was hard for me at first, I think, when I started getting rejections, but now I like to think of it as reminding me that I'm doing the work, you're not getting any rejections. Probably you need to be doing some more writing and submitting. So
yes, thank you for saying that. I wrote that on here for, this is what I think of it too. It's it's proof you're doing the work. If you weren't getting rejections, you wouldn't be submitting. So
yeah. And sometimes I think, rejections stink, but sometimes it's for the best. You hear of poets regretting having a terrible poem of theirs published, and it's like, well, darn it. And I've sent out some poems that I've later just edited the heck out of, and I'm so grateful they were rejected early on. So there's that part. And also just one thing that I've noticed with when I send out a bunch of packets to magazines, the first ones back are almost always rejections. So those stream in and you feel horrible about yourself, but it's okay. The first ones back are often rejections. You'll get some rejections late too, but you're not going to get an acceptance that day, but you will sometimes get a rejection that day. So it's okay. Breathe until you've heard back from all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, you guys. That's great. Because rejections, I know people take it all sorts of ways, and I try not to take it personally. Like I said, I don't anymore, but I think at the beginning it was a little harder, but you start to you just get used to the process after a while. Okay. The final thing is of getting an acceptance. So my student just got an acceptance the other day, and we had a cake and we celebrated because it was all very exciting. So celebrate when you get accepted. You a lot of journals publish online. So if that's the case, there will be a link once your work is published to your work. It could be a page that's just your work, or it could be like a scroll down to your work kind of thing. But go ahead and share that link on your social media sites, or as long as you're comfortable with people seeing what you've written, and you should be if you're publishing, because that's a part of it. Yeah, share that with people. Send an email, send a mass email to everyone you know. Like, people should be excited that your words are gaining traction out there. And Brianna said something at the beginning about sharing her words, and I really loved that, because there's something I read in a poetry craft book. I'm gonna just paraphrase it, but it said something about poems gain power once they're shared, right? Like, think about what your words can do. For you, it could have been a transformative, experience or thought, but once you share with others, it can become that for them too, right? So that's when it really becomes powerful and becomes something of the world, and you're like adding beauty to the world. So publishing is very exciting. It can be daunting, it can be sad if you take rejection seriously, but it's also like, once you start it, you just kind of keep going on it. Yeah.
Question for you. Since you're talking mostly about, it's mentioning that a lot of work is now online, how long do those links stay live? Like, I mean, if you get published today, like 2 years from now, are people going to be able to click on that link and be able to find your poem?
Yeah, as long as the journal stays active. Occasionally they'll change the link, like that happened with autofocus, is that, they started publishing books as well, so then they had to change all the links. So you might want to check in on that, but as long as the journal's active, your poem should stay active. If you have a website and you have all your links collected there, you might want to just go through and check on them every once in a while, make sure they all still link to something. But yes, they should stay links forever unless you request they take them down. And I'm saying forever, but we all know journals don't last forever. So it should last the length of the journal's life, is what I should really say. Okay, other questions, thoughts? We're wrapping up on time. But if anyone has anything that could be helpful to them outside of this that they'd like to cover, please, by all means.
Just an interjection, Shelley, I just checked on a poem of mine that was published 5 years ago, still there.
Yeah, I checked on mine the other day and I saw one had become defunct, but other than that, the rest of them are all still there. So, okay. Well, if that's it, I think, Matt, you're going to make this resource available to others outside of here. But if any of you have questions that you would like, here's my email at the bottom. Feel free to email me or Matt at the Nebraska Writers Collective. We are happy to answer your questions. If there's any way I can assist you with publishing, please let me know. I love to see people get published. It makes me very excited.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Holly. We appreciate this. I'll put this video on the Nebraska Writers Collective YouTube channel. You can contact me for the link if you don't find it, but it'll include a link to the PowerPoint that Holly sent. And if you like what you've seen, especially you watching at home on video in the future, donate to the Nebraska Writers Collective. We appreciate it. But again, let's all hear it for Holly. So.
Oh, thank you.